Good morning, everyone. Many of you will remember in 2017, we had at one of our meetings, Kathy Murray, a blind person, and her seeing eye dog, Mac. Quite a show. She explained to us what a difference the seeing eye dog made in her life and how it made her independent. Don MacGowan, who is going to be our speaker today, was also there, and he explained in general about the seeing eye and its work. The question comes up, certainly in my mind, where do these magnificent canines come from? Spoiler alert, you can't get them from Amazon Prime. Today, Don MacGowan is going to tell us about the Seeing Eyes breeding program, so we will know where these magnificent canines come from. Don spent 40 plus years in information technology in the insurance industry, but for some time now, he has been a volunteer at the Seeing Eye. He is the one who coordinates the Seeing Eyes outreach program, which means he dispatches groups of volunteers to visit schools, scouts, churches, service clubs, senior groups like us, corporations, and many others who want to learn about the Seeing Eye. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Don MacGowan to learn all about those magnificent canines.
Well, thank you, Rich. I appreciate the invitation, and to all, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you once again. Rich, when we began to discuss this visit, I don't think Zoom was something we had even heard of. And I had anticipated that we would visit in person as we did several years ago. Look forward to that. But life being what it is, here we are on Zoom. And I commend you for having the numbers of people that you do come in each week. It's quite something. And I'm also very pleased to be among several excellent speakers. I joined you for Frank Bolden several weeks ago, for Kadneet Singh last week, both very good presentations. I, again, commend you for the depth of the subject matter that you all choose to speak about. So for starters, you're wondering probably, what is the Seeing Eye doing these days? Nobody's doing much of anything because of COVID, and that's been true for us as well. It's been a very strange time at the Seeing Eye, where we essentially shut down the entire operation. We had a class of blind individuals in receiving dogs in March, and we were able to shoo them out a little bit early. They finished what they needed to do, but they had to go home in mid-March. And March, the rest of March, April, May, June, July, and most of August, we're doing nothing. We've sent the dogs all out. We have some 400 dogs on our campus at any given time. We've sent them all out to be with their puppy raisers or to be with trainers or with others who are qualified to care for dogs for an interim period. And the staff has not been in, the trainers, the kennel staff, the administrative staff has not been in the office. Some of them who can, working with Zoom meetings, working virtually. But because a lot of our work is hands-on, literally with the dogs and out in town in Morristown and caring for them in the kennel, there's nothing they can do during the time that we've been closed down. Happily, the Seeing Eye has a good endowment. We have good funding, good financing, and we are able to make our way through this period. But it's something nobody's comfortable with. The plan is that at the end of August, we will bring in a very small class of people who are blind to receive dogs. There will be about 10 of them, as I understand, all from New Jersey or close in, where they can be driven to the Seeing Eye to receive their dogs. We don't want to ask anybody to fly at this point or get into lengthy travel arrangements. So we're beginning to come back. August, end of August into early September will be an experimental class for people to be in for the normal 3 weeks. Hopefully it works. Hopefully we can broaden things a bit after that. But it's been just a devastating 6 months, as it's been for everyone, a period of time. We're doing something we've never done before. And as we bring the dogs back, about 10 at a time each week since the beginning of July, we're having to assess where they stand. Some dogs were all set to go. They were trained and all ready to go back in March, April. And we need to find out if they are still ready to go, if they need some retraining, if they need to be brought back up to speed. So all that's going on now in anticipation of the class of blind individuals coming in at the end of August. And as to remind you, as I said it three years ago, when the students come in, they come in for about 3.5 weeks. They stay at the Seeing Eye, eat meals at the Seeing Eye in the dining room. So all of the COVID issues, all of the hotel concerns, all of the restaurant concerns that we all are hearing about all the time apply to these folks as well. I imagine that they will be spread way out in the dining room and walked back and forth to their rooms carefully so that they're not close to one another. It will be a strange experience all the way around, but we're doing our best to get it started. So that's where we are. So when I talked 3 years ago, I gave you what I would call Seeing Eye 101, which is a broad picture of all that we do. And this time we'll be more sharply focused on the breeding program. And Bob Parker, I believe, is with us somewhere. I haven't seen him, but Bob volunteers at a facility that we call our breeding station, which is in Chester. And towards the end, we'll take questions, obviously, and Bob may want to chime in as well. So we look forward to hearing from him. Now, to repeat just a bit of the Seeing Eye 101, what we do at the Seeing Eye is we breed and we raise and we train dogs to become Seeing Eye dogs. That is to guide people who are blind to help them be safe in their travels day in and day out. Blind people, just like all of us, prize their independence. They want to be independent. And you say, well, how can a person who's blind be independent? Well, many use canes, some use dogs, some work with sighted guides, as we term them, that is, a husband, a wife, a brother, sister, someone who leads them. But people who are blind want to be independent just as every one of us does. And so the training that they receive at the Seeing Eye teaches them to be independent with the help of a dog. And the dogs keep them safe, and the dogs help them enter into society. Because when any of us sees a blind person with a white cane, we're not quite sure what to do. Should we approach that person? Should we offer to help? Should we want to, what do we do? And often we do nothing. But a person with a dog is a whole different story, because we're almost compelled to go and say, oh, what a nice dog you have. What's your dog's name? How old is your dog? How long have you had your dog? What does your dog do for you? And that helps a blind person easily engage in the social world that surrounds them, people that approach them. It makes conversation, it makes friendship ever so much easier than a white cane. Surprisingly few people actually use Seeing Eye dogs. Something like 4% of people who are blind use Seeing Eye dogs. But those 4% will say unequivocally, thank you, Seeing Eye, you've changed my life. You've made it possible for me to be independent and to enter into my social world that's around me. So it's something that's fun to see, it's gratifying to see, and it just keeps on going for 90 years thus far. The Seeing Eye proper, the building, the place that most people identify with the Seeing Eye is in Morristown, or Morris Township, just outside of Morristown. And it's a facility where the trainers, the kennel attendants, the administrative staff, volunteers, most people work out of that area. We also have a facility that we call our breeding station, and that's located in Chester. And that is a facility that was designed for breeding dogs, for giving dogs the earliest exposure, their earliest acquaintance with one another, with people, with other dogs, and experiences in the real world. And that's what we're going to focus on here. The breeding station was constructed 15, 16 years ago, very specifically designed for the purpose for which it was intended to serve. I'm going to mention the kinds of dogs we use, and then we're going to go to a DVD for about 6 or 7 minutes. This is called A Picture is Worth 1,000 Words, where you can see a bit of what the breeding station looks like and get some understanding of what goes on there. But first, what kinds of dogs do we use? We use 3 breeds, the most commonly used 3 breeds in any kinds of situations: for therapy dogs, for guide dogs, for police dogs, for military assistance dogs. And those are Golden Retrievers, Labrador Retrievers, and German Shepherds. When we go through the Port Authority terminal, when we see the soldiers there with their dogs, they're almost always either German Shepherds or Labs, not necessarily Goldens. Goldens are too happy to be in these serious roles. But we use the Goldens, the Labs, German Shepherds for a few reasons. One being, they're smart dogs. Now, all dogs are smart. Never underestimate a dog. As they're laying, sitting, standing, watching, listening, taking it in, they're absorbing an awful lot. They're smart dogs. They have good hearing, they have good vision. They're large enough, they're strong enough that they can fulfill their duties, whether they be military or security dogs, or whether they be guide dogs helping a person that's blind. They're large enough and strong enough to do those jobs. But the most important quality of all is that these dogs like to please. They like to know that their owners are happy with them. They like to be praised. They like to please. Once they know what's expected of them and what they're supposed to do, they want to do that. And they want to be praised. They want to be recognized for the good work that they've done. And that's extremely important for a guide dog, because we don't need a dog that says, oh, you want to go someplace? Well, I want to stay home. That doesn't work. We need a dog who, when the blind person gets out the harness and says, come on, let's go, the dogs are there and ready to go. And those 3 types of breeds, because they like to please, because they're big, strong, smart, hearing, vision, all that, are very well suited to the tasks for which we expect them to carry out. So let me now switch to the DVD. You'll see a title screen with 6 segments, and we're going to go through the first 3 of them. And Paul, you may need to help me. I'm going to go to the screen share. And I'm all set here.
I've enabled screen share. Don't forget to check the share sound button box at the lower left-hand corner.
There we are. And I'm going to play, we'll listen to the first 3. Now, when I click on this, it's supposed to say play all. It's supposed to say I want to play these things. What's going on? Well, all right. A picture is not going to be worth 1,000 words. I'll just keep talking. My apologies.
Don, is this video online anywhere?
It is, but I would not know exactly where to look. So that would be a tough experience to do. Okay. Well, so when we breed our dogs, when our dogs are out working, when they're being trained, when they're so forth, we are collecting information constantly about the dogs. The dogs, from the time they are born, and I'm going to go in a loop here, from the time the dogs are born, they begin their lives in the breeding station, the Seeing Eyes breeding station. And the breeding station is designed in such a way that there are a series of octagons with kennels, with pens around the octagon, all facing in towards the center. Reason being that dogs, puppies are pack animals. They like to know who's around. They like to know what's going on. They like to vocalize, to bark, to communicate with one another. Well, when they're in this space that's all facing together, 6 or 8 or 10 dogs all facing in towards one another, they don't need to bark because they can see what's going on. And that helps to have them become accustomed to not having to bark at every single thing that happens. They can see what's going on. And in that way, they begin to become quiet dogs. You will see a seeing eye dog out with a person not barking. Not barking. They don't bark. They simply don't. It's not in their vocabulary because they're comfortable in their surroundings. As the dogs are born, new dogs are born, almost in the 3rd or 4th day of their lives, they begin to spend time in a room that we call the puppy playroom. And the puppy playroom is a place where dogs are literally together with toys, with squeaky things, with things around that they can kick around and play with, bite and chew. There are surfaces on the floor of wood and carpet and tile, and even some surface like a subway grate in New York City. Paul,
John?
are you waving at me?
Yeah, I just found 3 YouTubes that actually look pretty much the same. One of them actually shows puppies playing with toys on the floor.
Well, that's the puppy playroom.
Do you want to show that right now?
What are the other? Well, yeah, what are the others?
They were posted on June 16th, and it's called the Seeing Eye Breeding Station Part 1 and that Part 2.
Well, let's look at Part 1, and then we'll come back to the puppy playroom.
Part 1 is wave or something if it's good. Is it working?
Yep, it's working.
Seeing Eye is really a special place.
I like seeing how the dogs that we breed here in turn become a guide dog. That's like the main reward of this job.
The mission of the Seeing Eye is to create this well-rounded, calm, confident dog.
I personally work here because I love all the dogs and we're doing something good for the world and setting these dogs on a great mission and because I love the puppies.
The Seeing Eye Breeding Facility.
We tried to prepare for every possible emergency when designing this facility. Things like loss of power, fire, or disease outbreak. We have a backup emergency generator, and the electrical and ventilation systems were designed so that any one area can be isolated from the rest. We're also proud of being energy efficient and environmentally friendly. We have a heat recovery system and a waste treatment plant where we recycle our kennel washdown water. The buildings only occupy 4 acres, and the other 326 acres are preserved as undeveloped land. We built this facility with dogs in mind. Big emphasis on healthy, happy dogs. And the upside of the design is that we also now have healthy, happy people because there's so much natural light here that and the interactions that we're able to have here in this new facility that we weren't able to have in our old facility with the dogs, it just makes for a happier morale. We found the octagonal design was very conducive to the presence of pack. Dogs are pack animals, and they like to be able to feel that their pack is with them. And yet even we have the octagonal design in the whelping kennel. We don't want the dogs on top of each other. We don't want them feeling threatened. And what you notice when you go into the whelping kennel is that there may be 7 moms and their pups in there, and it's quiet.
Calms dogs, if you can walk into a pavilion and they can all see you at once, if everybody can see what's happening, they're a lot calmer. And at the same time, it gives moms that are whelping a little bit of space from each other.
The design did a tremendous amount to help us with that, and we believe that quiet and relaxed moms raise relaxed pups, and we want our puppies to be relaxed, calm, and at the same time confident.
The barrier system, keeping disease out.
There are diseases that the unvaccinated, unprotected dogs are vulnerable to. And we can set precautions in place by vaccinating and hope that there are maternal antibodies to protect the young pups. But there's a window of opportunity for disease to strike puppies. So for that reason, the barrier is put in place. When you open our front door and walk in, basically that's the same as being in the outside world. And before, if you're a human, you're entering the facility, you need to change your clothes or put on a protective oversuit. Not protecting yourself, we're protecting the dogs from you. So we have 5 dressing rooms, and there's a bench that divides the outside world from our inside world, or our clean zone. And then they put on shoes one at a time, shoe covers, and they have to kind of do a ballet as they put first one foot over and then the other after putting on these shoe coverings.
Everything that's brought into this facility has to go through special avenues to get into the building itself. It has to be, brought in its original boxes, passed over so that it can go into the clean area safe, so that there's no contamination.
What we're trying to do with the barrier is keep out significant canine disease.
Breeding and whelping 650 puppies a year.
The breeding station of the Seeing Eye is attempting to produce each year about 650 pups for our program.
Our goal is to have dogs that will work well with people. So the dogs are purposely selected to be breeders if they have the right temperament.
The dogs that come out here to be breeders are picked through a selection process with our geneticist, Dr. Eldon Layton. And he has a number that's assigned to each dog, and it takes into effect their hit score, their temperament score, trainability score, and all these numbers are combined, and the dogs come out with a estimated breeding.
At any given point here on this campus, we usually have somewhere in the vicinity of 80 adult breeding dogs. We collect semen on all of our male dogs, and it's frozen and stored in liquid nitrogen. Half of it is kept on this campus and half on the Morristown campus. Any dog's samples are split between the 2 campuses so that, God forbid, we lose one of the freezers, we've got the backup of the other.
In the colony, up in the breeding area, the males live with the females. As long as they're not in heat, we do try to house the dogs so that they always have someone that they're living with and they don't have to be penned by themselves, just for socialization purposes. When the females are in heat, we breed them. They have maybe 4 litters, and then they're retired.
During the dog's pregnancy, we do 3 ultrasounds at 25, 35, and 45 days. And during that time, we first check to make sure that they are pregnant, and then we assess the viability of the fetus. And as they get closer to parturition, which means the birth process, we move them from the breeding kennel, where the adult breeders live, over to the whelping kennel. And they go over there 10 to 14 days before they're due to whelp so that they can acclimate. The whelping kennel is the most highly protected zone. And going in there, we actually do another foot change, and we scrub our arms again before entering there. And dogs entering in there to whelp actually have a bath before they go in.
Once they have their litters and they go down to the other facility, the whelping end, then they stay down there for about 6 weeks till their puppies are weaned, and then the females back up top into breeding, and we'll breed them, the next time around on their next heat cycle.
We have somewhere between about 85, 90 litters a year, and somewhere around 7.8 puppies is our average litter size.
On-site healthcare for dogs.
Well, let's stop it at that point.
Since the dogs live with us for 2 years, there's preventive health.
That's exactly the portion of the DVD that I wanted to show, so you scored. Thank you very much. And indeed, that picture is worth 1,000 words. A couple of disclaimers. We do not breed any longer 650 dogs a year. That DVD is something like 15 or 16 years old. In the intervening time, we've gotten better at what we do. And we breed now somewhere 400 to 450 dogs a year. And that fulfills the need for dogs as we bring about a dozen classes in each year to receive dogs. But otherwise, everything that was discussed there is the case. The barrier, it just looks like COVID-19, doesn't it? When we clean up and we go in there and clean everything off before it's exposed to the dogs in the youngest stages. So that's a look at the breeding station, a unique design, very specifically designed for the purposes of breeding. And we find that the results are very, very good. What would happen next? In the dogs' lives, after several days, they begin to spend time in the puppy playroom, as I was describing earlier. And in the puppy playroom, dogs get acclimated to being with one another, to playing with toys, to playing with one another on floor surfaces, with balls, with steps, with ramps, with all kinds of things in there to occupy them, to get them used to just playing together and trying out ideas. Puppy playroom is a fun place. Bob Parker can probably attest to that. Volunteers spend some time in there, and they insist that that's a really tough place to be, in that puppy playroom with all these little dogs. And I'm not sure that I completely believe, but I'll take their word for it. After about 8 weeks, the dogs leave the breeding station, and then each dog goes out to live with a family. And these are collectively known as puppy raisers. We've got a network of something like 500 puppy raisers in New Jersey, in Eastern Pennsylvania, in Northern Delaware, who are wonderful people who say, yeah, I will take a seeing eye puppy at the age of about 8 weeks, keep that puppy for 14 or 15 months, and train the dog not to be a seeing eye dog, but to be a good dog in the house, to not be barking at everything, to not jump on furniture, to not jump up on people, to be good on the leash, to be good in every respect other than literally being a seeing eye dog at that point. So these puppy raisers are marvelous people. There are people or families that will raise a puppy and say, okay, that's good, I've done that. There are people who will raise 10, 20, 30, even 40 puppies over a long span of years, having those dogs for, as I say, 14 or 15 months, and then turning them back to the seeing eye. And these people are really the heartbeat of the seeing eye, because they're taking the dogs through the period while they're growing up, and they're teaching them to be good doggy citizens. They're organized into puppy clubs. There's a puppy club in Essex County, in Bergen County, and in Sussex County. There isn't right now in Union County, regrettably, Monmouth County, all around. There are puppy clubs. And these are led by very dedicated leaders who help the puppy raisers be successful in what they're doing. They meet once a month, maybe twice a month, whatever their schedule is. And the puppy raiser will say, hey, Paul, I think you need to do a little bit more work in this area with your dog because of the way he's behaving. Or they might say, Rich, you're doing great. I like the way your dog is behaving. The puppy raisers, the puppy club leaders are keeping track of all of this. They're keeping track of the dogs that look like they're particularly good, the dogs that are likely to make it as seeing eye dogs, the dogs that even look like they could become breeders when their time comes. So they play a very key role in helping to shape the development of these dogs. The puppy clubs take their puppies on trips to Yankee Stadium and to Newark Airport and to New York City. And they play games, they play follow the leader, they play all sorts of games to challenge the dogs to obey commands, to do what they're supposed to do, to be calm, not be barking, not chasing other dogs, not chasing squirrels, and so on and so on. So these people are vital to the seeing eye. They're not paid, they're not staff, but they do get a stipend to help to cover the cost of dog food. Otherwise, it's a volunteer activity. So the puppy raisers have the puppies for 14 or 15 months, and then the seeing eye comes back and says, okay, time for you to return your dog to the seeing eye. And people will say, this is just a terrible time. You know, the dogs are like children, although sometimes we wish we could give our children away. But in any event, the dogs are like children that you learn to love, that becomes part of your family. You let the dog go, and the dog comes in for training. Now what happens after medical checkup and just making sure everything is good with the dog? Now training begins. And with training, the first thing we do is to have the dogs become used to wearing a harness. And this is a harness. It's leather. It's got metal in the handles. So it becomes a firm connection between the dog and the person, the trainer initially, and later on the blind person. And they learn to become comfortable in the harness. And then the trainers begin to take the dogs out onto the streets of Morristown, which is our classroom, and they will walk up and down the sidewalks, first getting used to simply walking in a straight line with the harness, with the person holding the harness on the sidewalk. And then they're taught to stop at an intersection. Stopping means at the beginning, I as a trainer, I'm walking with my dog. We come to a curb, I stop the dog. And I praise him. Because remember, these dogs like to please. I praise him and I say, good dog, good dog. And then we go to the next street and the next curb and I stop him again and I praise him again. Good dog, good dog. And what happens is after a day and a half of that, something like that, the dog figures this out, that if he stops when he comes to a curb, he's going to get praised, and he likes that. And he stops. And we continue to praise, to reinforce, continually to reinforce. The behavior is what we want. We want the dog to know that he's doing the right thing by praising him. And he's looking for that praise. So then we move on to obstacles, dogs walking around obstacles in a way that leaves room to keep me safe, so I don't walk into something that he walks right beside. We teach him to walk around, keep me safe, praise, praise, praise all the time. And looking for overheads, looking for things overhead, a low branch, an umbrella in front of a restaurant, an awning, something like that where I could bang my head. We teach the dogs to look up, counterintuitive for a dog. We teach the dogs to look up and recognize something that I might bump my head into, like an obstacle, and lead me around it so I'm safe and not going to get hit in the head by complete surprise. And imagine being a blind person suddenly being hit on the head when you had no idea anything was even there. Terrifying. The dogs, we teach the dogs to go up and down stairs slowly, a step at a time, a step at a time. So a blind person can find the handrail and be led up by the dog one step at a time safely, or down the stairs. Dogs are taught to stop at the bottom of the flight of stairs. Okay, red light and green, we'll get to that. Dogs are taught to stop at the bottom of a flight of stairs, at the top of a flight of stairs, and a blind person will say the most frightening place to be is at the top of a flight of stairs, particularly if it's not a flight of stairs that they're familiar with, such as in their home or their office or church or someplace they're familiar with. So they rely on the dogs to come to the top of a flight of stairs, stop, let them get oriented, find a handrail, feel with their foot the top of the stairs, and then step by step by step down the stairs at a safe pace so the person can negotiate these stairs confidently. Escalators, elevators, ramps, all kinds of things we teach the dogs in training to become comfortable with, to understand, to recognize, and not be afraid of. Okay, the question about red light, green light, yellow light, dogs don't know. Dogs don't have good color vision. Part of the training when we're working with the blind people is to say, okay, we're at an intersection. Now, blind person, you have to listen. You have to listen and see, are there cars passing in front of you? If so, it's probably not safe to walk. Are there cars going in the same direction as you're going? It may be safe to walk. And so I'll say to my dog, when I think it's safe, forward. Now, here comes another critical piece of training. We teach the dogs what we call intelligent disobedience. Intelligent disobedience, meaning even though these dogs want to do the right thing, they want to do what they're told to do by their owners, there are times when they need to not do those things. When I visit with school kids, I always say, if I took you out in the street in front of the school and told you to run across the street, would you do it? And they all say, no, it's not safe, it's not safe. They're practicing intelligent disobedience. We do an interesting thing while we're training dogs. We pair up trainers, a trainer with a dog, a trainer in a Prius, a quiet, silent electric car. And I, the trainer with the dog, will say, okay, let's cross the street, forward. And my partner in the car is going to come screeching around the corner just when I'm doing that. And I need to teach the dog that that car is something to be afraid of and pull him back. Because until this point, dogs think that cars are a friendly thing. We get in the car, we go for a walk, we go to the park, we go visit family, we do whatever we do. A car is a friendly thing. The dog does not know until he's taught that a car is dangerous, that a car is a threat, and that he needs to pull back and keep his owner safe when a car is coming around the corner, or when a car is simply passing in front of him, or if somebody's riding a bicycle, or if there's construction tape there that wasn't there yesterday. Owner says, forward, go. Dog will say, no, can't go. I'll pull him back to keep him safe, and if possible, find another way around. So these are all the things that we train the dogs to do. As we're doing these, the trainers, the training managers are keeping close watch on the dogs and saying, these dogs are good. These dogs are quick on the uptake. They're good at training. They're picking it up quickly. They could be breeders. They could be breeders. Or they may say, okay, this dog is good, but there's an issue. Maybe not quite as confident as we would wish. Maybe a little bit too much of a tendency to chase after squirrels or leaves or something. Okay, I don't think we want this dog. They're looking for the best of the best dogs to breed based on all that they see in the puppy playroom, from the trainers, from the puppy raisers. Everyone who has a hand in this dog's development is inputting and saying, I like this dog, I think this dog has a lot to offer, or I see some signs. Also, from the dog's earliest days, we're looking at them medically so as to not pass along any characteristics that we don't want. Most commonly, hip dysplasia. Hip dysplasia, a name that you may know, prone for large dogs to develop problems in their hips. We might call them arthritis of the hips if it was a person, but it's a ball and a socket joint issue where the socket is not quite as tight around the ball as it should be. We x-ray the dogs early. We x-ray the dogs and we can see if it looks like there's a ball and socket that's not as tight as it ought to be, and if hip dysplasia may occur. Those dogs will not breed, just because we don't want to pass along that characteristic. So the question of how do we choose dogs to breed is an involved one. It's their lineage, it's their heritage, it's their medical results, it's their training results, is they're little in a puppy playroom and being raised. It's a whole combination of things that say this dog looks really good, this dog looks okay to be a working dog, but not to breed, and this dog needs to leave the program. About 5/8 of our dogs succeed through the program. They'll make it all the way through, from puppy raising to training to being matched up with a person who's blind, and go out and do their job for 6, 7, 8, 9 years. About 3/8 of our dogs do not make it. And they become sometimes military dogs, police dogs, drug sniffing dogs, bomb sniffing dogs, therapy dogs, back to their puppy raiser to be raised to just live a good life as a non-working dog. They go in lots of directions. But the best of them, the 5/8 of them or so, go on to become seeing eye dogs matched up with a person who's blind. Matching itself, a very interesting process, because during the course of training dogs and puppy raising and training, we're taking them to New York City, we're taking them to Newark Airport, all these places. And it becomes evident very quickly that some dogs don't like to be in New York City, just like some people. Or other dogs thrive on it. The excitement, the noise, the fuss, the hubbub, they like this. And so a person who's blind, who commutes to the city or who lives in the city, any large city, they will get a dog that was happy in the city. They will not get a dog who shied away from being in the city. A person who's older, maybe not so steady on their feet, will get a dog that's more gentle, that doesn't pull as hard, that doesn't like to walk as fast, and they'll get a dog that's more suited to their temperament. So we spend a lot of time learning about the people who are coming in to receive dogs, learning about the dogs, and putting together the best match that we possibly can. Saying, I think this dog is the right dog for you because of your commute to New York or because of your unsteadiness on your feet or whatever it is. And that's what we do. That's what the Seeing Eye does. We have about a dozen classes a year, each with about 24 people. Nearly 500 dogs get placed. Nearly 300 dogs get placed, and people go on to live marvelous lives, looking back, saying, thank you, Seeing Eye, you've changed my life. Gratifying to see. Any questions? And if Bob Parker is here, if Bob would like to chime in, certainly happy to hear from him.
Well, thank you, Don. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep. And good morning, everyone. It was especially good to see the video because many of the people in that video, while that video was taken 15 years ago, are still there. And I work with them on a weekly basis. I've been volunteering at the breeding station at Seeing Eye and specifically at the breeding station now for 12 years. And I've been lucky enough to have been assigned there. As you've seen, when I enter the breeding station, I have to announce myself in. I am buzzed in, and then I go into that changing room that you saw, and I take off my street clothes. I step over that bench. I select scrubs, and I have a pair of shoes in there dedicated to me, and I change all that, and then I go out the inside door, if you will, the clean side of the changing room, into the breeding station area. Once I go through that door, there's a board there and that I can look at to see if on that day I'm going to be assigned to the whelping area or the breeding area. And then I pick up that assignment. I go on Wednesdays, and the team, the Wednesday morning rather, team is made up of 10 people. And there are teams assigned every day of the week. And so as a team, we either cover the breeding area or the whelping area. Some additions to what you've heard from Don. If I'm assigned to the breeding area, up in that area, there's a list of dogs that are scheduled to be exercised on that day. There's a prioritization on that list such that the pregnant dogs will get exercised, or the dogs that were not exercised the prior day will be given a priority. We try and exercise them in pairs. So what you saw was the pavilions. That octagon that Don mentioned is a pavilion, and there are 5 pavilions in the breeding area, each of them having 14 pens. And we will go in there and select a pair of dogs and exercise them for 20 minutes or so. We might also, up in that area, might also need to wash the feeding bowls. There's an industrial dishwasher that we'll use to wash the feeding bowls, or we might be assigned to prepare the meals for the next 2 meals that are given to the dogs, that afternoon's meal and the following morning's meal. The staff up in that area comes in at 6:30 in the morning, and every day they clean and disinfect all of those pens, all of those active, the pavilions that are active get cleaned and disinfected every single day. After a female has been bred 5 times, she will then be retired. So, the puppy raising family will have first priority on taking her back into their home. A male can be used to sire litters up to 10 times. If when I go in, instead of being assigned to the breeding area, I'm assigned to the whelping area, I go down into that area, and as you heard Dr. Holly say, I need to change my shoes again, okay? Because the inside exercise shoes are not appropriate for the whelping area. The gestation period for a female is 65 days. And so as you heard, she is moved from the breeding area down into the whelping area about a week to 10 days prior to her expected delivery. And again, as you heard, the average litter is between 7 and 8 puppies. In there, and again, in the whelping area, there are 5 pavilions. And when the female is expected to be delivering, there is a big plastic pool put in her pen, and essentially that's where she whelps her puppies. The staff is there to help her if needed. When it is expected that she will whelp within a day or so, the staff will stay overnight to be there for her. After about 4 weeks of nursing on the mother, they are then available to be socialized, as Don said, in those playrooms. So at 4 weeks of age, the volunteers can go in, pick up the litter, take them to the playroom and play with them, socialize them, make sure they're familiar with people and all of the toys and noises and things that Don spoke about. We make sure that they're comfortable with us touching them, touching their feet, touching their ears, touching their tails. And then at about 5 weeks, we also start leash walking them, just making them familiar with something around their neck, a leash around their neck. At 5.5 weeks, they are, the mom is taken away from them there and brought back up to the breeding station, and they're on, that litter is then on their own. We continue to socialize them until they're about 7 weeks old, at which time, as Don said, they are given out to puppy raising families. So it's been a joy. If there's one takeaway from all of this that you've heard today relative to the breeding station, is that these dogs are given exceptional care. It is simply unbelievable, the care and love that they get while they're at that breeding station. So with that,
so Bob, you've seen a lot of puppies born, haven't you?
I certainly have, yeah.
Does anything stand out to you as, wow, this was just something?
Well, one of the people, Don, in the video, Janice Keene, was the supervisor. She's no longer there. She was the supervisor of the whelping area, and she was exceptionally competent at what she did. She allowed me a couple of times to watch the whelping process. She actually, at times, because of the positioning of the puppy within the mother, she actually had to, what is called feathering. She actually had to reach up inside the mom and turn the puppy so that it could come out of the birth channel. The puppies, I've seen stillborns. These dogs are just incredibly well taken care of, but sometimes there's a puppy that is stillborn. When the puppies are very young, one of the processes that takes place is they clip the dew claws. And so they'll bring the litter into the clinical area of the whelping area and clip the dew claws off. And that's a process that you're a little bit uncomfortable to watch and a little bit uncomfortable, but the puppies are not really hurt by it. But,
what is that word? Dew claws?
Dew claws, yeah.
What is that?
That's the extra toe on the bottom of the leg. Yeah.
Okay.
When it comes time for the puppies to leave and be sent off to their puppy raising family, the puppies are washed. They're given a medication up their nose. They're for the first time, they're put in a van and taken from the breeding station over to headquarters. at which time they are picked up by drivers that will take them to the puppy raising family. So that's a very traumatic day for the puppy because they go through all of this, these activities that are new to them. But as Don has said, these puppy raising families are very, very dedicated. Some of them have raised many puppies. And when those puppies come back then after 14, 15 months, come back to the school, some of them are selected to be breeders. And within the breeding station, I have seen the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter all there at the same time, acting as part of the breeding population.
Wow. A couple of things to add. There's a period of time in a dog's life, and I think it would be in people's lives too, that we call an imprint period, said to be something like 4 months, where what these puppies learn in the first 4 months of their lives just becomes natural, instinctive to them. They don't know how they learned it or where or from whom they learned it. But all of this socialization that goes on early in the puppy playroom and in the first months of being out with their families all falls into this imprint period, where the more we can teach them and expose them to during this time, the better equipped they will be as they begin to face the cold, cruel world that's out there and all the things that they'll be exposed to. Other interesting note is that, as I said earlier, we had to cancel a whole string of classes, which of course has meant that the breeding program had to be put on hold too, or slowed way down. At the time we shut the doors in March, there were some moms, some mother puppies who were pregnant and who were still to deliver. And of course that happened. And then after that, we simply had to slow everything down. In some terms, you could call it a supply chain, where the need for puppies to put into training diminished. And so the breeding station needed to slow down its schedule too. And Bob, I don't know exactly what's going on right now. Maybe you do. I imagine we'll start to pick up fairly soon to get back into something approaching normal.
Yeah, well, since that time, Don, the volunteers have been asked not to show up at the breeding station. We've been told that that will not open up until after the summer. I don't have any information as to exactly when we'll be invited back. It's a little bit hard to imagine how the staff at the breeding station is handling everything. But as you say, the dogs have been farmed out to staff, to puppy raising families, to other volunteers. So the activity there is very, very low.
Well, Rich, I think that does it for us.
Okay, let me remind you that if you want to ask a question, you need to raise your blue hand. And you do that by clicking the blue hand icon that's at the bottom of the participants panel, which will appear on the right if you click the participants icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or maybe at the top of your Zoom screen. So we have a number of people ready with questions. And the first one is Mary Beth. Take it away. Oh, Mary Beth, I'm sorry. You have to unmute yourself.
Don, my question was, has there been any attempt to look at any hypoallergenic dogs to see if any type could become a seeing eye dog? Because sometimes allergies in the family, which is my own experience, can inhibit getting a seeing eye dog.
Yes, on occasion, they have brought in boxers, and on occasion they have brought in standard poodles to address that allergy situation.
And standard poodles have an acceptable disposition?
They do, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, some of that depends on who you ask. Poodles have an independent streak, and we do not breed poodles. We have experimented with that, found it difficult. So we have some trusted breeders that we will go to if a person with allergies needs to have a dog, but we do not breed them ourselves. And training is, it's a challenge, put it that way. Mary Beth, are you connected to Tom Hansberry or Dennis Hansberry?
Mary Beth, you have to unmute.
I did again. So Don, you and I have known each other since I was 5 years old and you were 7, and we went to the Arlington Avenue Presbyterian Church.
Oh my goodness, oh my
Only
goodness.
then I went by a different name. I was called Mimi and my brother was Skippy.
And what was your last name?
Garrett.
Ah.
And then I met you years later when both my husband, Tom Hansberry, and I worked for Prudential.
Yeah. Well, so this is called a small world, isn't it?
A very small world, as
Nice,
Paul and
nice.
I found out yesterday.
Nice to see you.
Mary Beth and I grew up and graduated high school in the same year, but in towns that are adjacent to each other in northern New Jersey. So we have friends in common up there.
Where were you, Paul?
I was in Hillsdale, New Jersey, and she was in Westwood.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah.
Other question?
Rich, you're next.
Yeah, you did a great job of explaining why the 3 breeds and the process as they go through training of looking for good characteristics that would make a good breeding dog and that you want to keep that line going. There was mention of a geneticist. Can you tell us anything about what part the geneticist might play in deciding which dogs to be breeders?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, and I can't do it thorough justice, but I can skim the surface. One of the things the geneticist does is assign what we call an estimated breeding value, which is a terrible sounding word, but it's the combination of characteristics, medical characteristics, behavioral characteristics, something to do with the lineage of the puppy, and through all of this comes an estimated breeding value. And if you're high on the list, if you have a higher number, you're a better candidate to breed. If you have a lower number, you're not such a good candidate to breed. As noted in the DVD, they're looking at blood, they're analyzing blood, they're even saving sperm samples. We can do some in vivo fertilization if we think that, in vitro fertilization, if we think that that's the right thing to do to bring a couple of characteristics together. But yeah, the fellow referenced, Dr. Eldon Layton, is no longer working at the Seeing Eye, but he's the one that devised the values, the mathematical values that we use to this day to determine which dogs are likely to be the best to mate. And we always have to remember that no matter what they do, no matter how scientifically precise that process is, Mother Nature is always at work. And so strange things happen.
Yeah, there is still a geneticist on staff. And one thing that should be mentioned is that at times the Seeing Eye will crossbreed Goldens and Labs. And they have found that the results of that crossbreeding is very successful in the training process.
Great. Okay, Walter, you're next.
Yes. I want to say I really enjoyed hearing the part about the breeding program
and seeing the Chester operations. I did attend the talk last time, and I have a couple of questions. From the last talk that was given, I was a little bit surprised to learn that the dogs don't live that long and that the owners, the blind people actually go through 2 or 3 dogs over time rather quickly. And I asked what the cause of death was, and they told me cancer. So I was a little bit surprised about that. My parents had sort of a mixed breed shepherd. It got fed nothing but, home cooked meals. And it, normally they live to be about 12 years old, and this one lived to be 17. And so that's one question. The other question is, what diseases are you trying to protect them when they're very young and aren't vaccinated yet? And since pets can catch COVID from humans, were there any cases of COVID problems in the breeding program?
To start with the end, none that I know of. But as we say, the dogs have all been scattered to the 4 winds. So hopefully they're all being kept safe in their own ways. As for the ages of the dogs, the length of service, I think what you're referring to, Kathy Murray, who was with me in 2017, her dog Mac was new to her at the time. Her prior dog, which was a German Shepherd, had died very suddenly of a blood cancer. The dogs will last 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 years, depending entirely on the dog and its physical constitution, depending on how hard they are worked. Just like people, some people live forever and some people don't. And dogs are the same way, depending on many things. And what we're trying to protect them from in the breeding station, Bob may have a better answer than I do, but it's just, whatever germs are around. They're entirely susceptible at the time they're born, just like a newborn infant has no immunities, and so new puppies have the same thing. So we're not trying to protect them from anything in particular, but just until they can get acclimated to the environment, we want to keep them as germ-free as we can. Bob, is there more?
Just that part of that process, and again, the barrier facility and the changing room and everything like that is not only to protect the individual puppy, but to protect the entire community of dogs there. Recently, earlier this year, there was a kennel cough outbreak, and so the pavilions were quarantined. And we were not allowed to exercise those dogs in that quarantine pavilion. So there's very great care given, as I mentioned, to these dogs. One other thing about a dog that has become a guide dog and now has reached an age where it's no longer able to work as aggressively as it might be, those dogs are retired. They can stay with the family. They live for a number of years longer. They could be adopted out to families that are interested in an older dog. So they live a long life. And as Don has said, they're active as guide dogs for 9, 10 years very frequently. Some blind people have had 5, 6, 7, 8 guide dogs throughout their life. All of them being in service for 8, 9, 10 years.
So at this point, let me observe that it's actually past 11:30, so officially perhaps the meeting is over, and yet if Don and Bob are willing to stick around a little bit while longer, we actually have about half a dozen more people with raised hands. Is that okay with you?
Sure, happy to
Okay,
stay,
so look,
yeah.
if you have to leave, that's fine. And so we'll continue. Let me slip in a quick question myself. This is a remarkable facility you have. I mean, it's large and you're processing a large number of dogs. It's really, truly astounding and wonderful work. but I'm wondering whether the Seeing Eye has comparable facilities in other parts of the country.
No, the Seeing Eye exists here in New Jersey, in Morristown. That's it. There are 11 guide dog schools in the United States. Some in Florida, some in California. New York State has several, Michigan. But the Seeing Eye is a standalone entity. All the schools are standalone. They come together in an organization called the Association of the American Guide Dog Federation of America, something like that, where the schools come together and they compare notes and best practices. And obviously we're all doing the same kinds of things. But the Seeing Eye is a standalone organization with no subsidiaries, no franchises, no nothing. What you see is what you get.
Yeah. One thing of note there is that the Seeing Eye will farm out some of its breeders to other countries. So Germany, Japan, England, and they will bring in breeders from those countries into their breeding program to replenish the line or whatever.
Interesting. Mike Martin, oh, your hand just went down. Mike, did you have a question? Are you unmuted? Yeah. You have to unmute, Mike.
My questions were answered. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. So Al Aho, unmute yourself and ask your question.
First, a great heartwarming talk by you, Don and Bob. As a matter of curiosity, since I'm a computer scientist, has anybody developed a matching program, computer program, to match dogs with blind people?
Computer dating.
Well, this day and age, I'll never say never, but I like to think that what we do is a very high touch activity. So there certainly is nothing out there in the works right now that I'm aware of. And I hope and pray that there isn't, because so much individual attention. Just as a little side note to this, you might ask, what qualifications do trainers need to have? People to train the dogs and then train people to work with the dogs. And the answer to that question is not like pre-vet or they have a whole history of working with dogs. The answer to that question is that they're all college graduates and they all display a desire and an interest in working with people. Because when we're training, it's really the people who need the careful attention. Anybody can be trained really to work with a dog. It's not that difficult. Dogs are so receptive and it's a repetitive process and so on. But when we bring people in to learn to work with dogs, particularly the first time that they're in, these people are nervous, they're excited. Some of them are angry. Some of them are upset because of their blindness. Some of them haven't adapted very well. They come in with all sorts of anxieties and hopes and aspirations. And the trainers really need to work more with people than with the dogs, and recognize when the pieces are fitting together, recognize when it's all working well, recognize when things are good, and when they're not, to suggest, why don't you try this? Why don't you do this with your dog? Express this to your dog this way or that way, and little nuanced details. And I don't think artificial intelligence, as good as it might be, I don't think it's there yet. I hope.
When a blind person applies to the Seeing Eye to obtain a guide dog, somebody goes out to meet them in their home, in their environment, and interviews them, and gets a bit of understanding of who they are and the environment they live in. The trainer that trains the dog is a part of the decision process of how these dogs will be assigned to individual students. There's a committee that makes that matching decision, and it could come down to the very day that the dog is introduced to the blind person.
Thank you. Mort, you're next.
My commendation to both Don and Bob, Volunteers for Years, just a great program. But who pays for the this extensive program, the staff and the facilities?
Oh, didn't you bring your checkbook? No, that's a good question. And I'm going to answer it two ways. One way is that the blind person who comes in is asked to pay $150. $150. And for that $150, we bring people in from wherever they come from, and it could be from New Jersey, it could be from California. We accommodate them for the 3.5 weeks that they're there, room, board, training with the dog, working with the dog, and sending them on their way with their dog. $150. That's what it was first charged in 90 years ago when the Seeing Eye was first founded, and that amount has stayed the same. Now, that amount does not pay the bills. To put it in perspective, the Seeing Eye is about a $25 million corporation, blessed with a very good endowment. And I shouldn't say blessed, we've worked hard for that very good endowment that spins off about half the costs of paying for the company each year. The other half, the other $12, $13 million, we raise each year through some very disciplined fundraising development activities. We've got a mail list like you wouldn't believe. Events are being held, special events, trustees are out holding events, raising money. What I do, my little job with what we call Pennies for Puppies program, is we go out and ask Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, schools, whoever, won't you contribute back to the Seeing Eye? And I will be so brazen as to ask you, won't you be so good as to contribute something to the Seeing Eye, because every little bit helps. In our outreach program, we raise about $100,000 a year, but that obviously is not even scratching the surface. So it's big money. There's a lot of people who are committed to this, corporations, foundations, trusts, people who are blind who use Seeing Eye dogs upon their death sometimes give their estate to the Seeing Eye. The feelings are that strong. So the answer is that the funding comes from every direction. The need is substantial. We're fortunate in being able to meet it. And this year will be a bit of a strange year, but our financial planning is done over a few years at a time, knowing we're going to have good years, we're going to have not so good years, and things balance out.
So, thank you, Don and Bob. So with that, we'll hand it back to Rich Jager. You're unmuted, Rich.
Don, thank you so much for the presentation. It was great to have you back. It was a very enlightening presentation, and the Seeing Eye is such an important organization and does such wonderful work. It was great to get that view of what's behind the scenes and all of the work and expertise and science that goes into providing guide dogs to help the blind people. And we thank you very much for coming and making such a wonderful presentation. And Bob as well, thank you so much for adding to this presentation and sharing your experiences and your knowledge as well.
And Rich, I'll make it a standing offer that when we get back to something approximating normal, be happy to come and visit with a real live dog. In the meantime, I have this little guy who is not quite as good as a real dog, but it's the best we can do for now.
I appreciate that. I love dogs, and we have a couple of ways of thanking you besides the words I just uttered. That is our certificate of appreciation, and you'll see a beautiful orchid on there. recognizing that back in 1930, when the Summit Old Guard was founded, Summit was a orchid growing and distribution capital of possibly the United States. Beautiful orchid, and that is one way we show our appreciation for your presentation. And the other way we show our appreciation is by what we call the Old Guard salute, which is basically a standing ovation. And I'm not sure if the host has unmuted everybody.
I tried. Go ahead, everybody.
So,
Well, thank you, and it's been an absolute